You actually Subcommittee on National Security will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. The Chair notes that he is responsible under the rules of the House and the rules of the committee to maintain order and preserve decorum in the committee room, and we will do that, and disruption of business will not be tolerated. Thank you very much. Chair now recognizes himself for an opening statement. BDS is the campaign for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. The BDS movement seeks to target the State of Israel for boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. The purported goals to leverage negative treatment of Israel to procure peace in the region. However, it is clear that the ultimate goal of the BDS movement is not to simply exert pressure on Israel to alter domestic policies. They would like to isolate, delegitimize, and irrevocably cripple the Jewish state. BDS supporter and professor at Cal State University, Asad Abu Khalil, has said, "The real aim of BDS is to bring down the State of Israel. That should be stated as an unambiguous goal. There should not be any equivocation on the subject. Justice and freedom for the Palestinians are incompatible with the existence of the State of Israel," end quote. Another supporter of BDS, writer John Spitzer, stated, quote, "BDS's stated goals logically imply the end of Israel as a Jewish state," end quote. The notion that BDS is simply a harmless political movement is not true. BDS is better understood as an attempt to single out the world's only Jewish state for negative treatment through economic warfare. Now, U.S. policy should actively oppose attempts to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel as our most dependable ally in the Middle East, the region's only democracy, and a country that shares our values. Israel deserves our steadfast support. We need to nip BDS in the bud. This hearing is timely in light of recent comments by the State Department spokesman regarding anti-BDS language contained in the Trade Authority bill recently passed by Congress. While the bill specifically mandates that U.S. negotiators pressure potential trading partners to reject BDS, the State Department indicated it would not enforce the language. Congress included the anti-BDS provision because it wanted to stymie efforts emanating particularly from European countries where anti-Semitism, unfortunately, is at a post-World War II high, to target Israel. Congress needs to conduct oversight of the State Department to ensure compliance with the statutory law. Now, BDS is not a mainstream position in the United States, but it has gained traction on college campuses and in European capitals. The goals of BDS go beyond the idea of encouraging corporations and academic institutions to boycott and divest from businesses in Judea and Samaria. Support for BDS is curious in light of the fact that many advocates for BDS have no qualms with trading with rogue regimes such as Iran. Indeed, these advocates seek to apply a completely separate standard to the world's only Jewish state while turning a blind eye to militant Islamic regimes that threaten both Israel and the United States. According to a recent study by the Israeli Finance Ministry, boycotts present a significant threat to Israel's economy. Boycotts threaten inflation, layoffs, and potential 20% drop in exports. If European companies and governments were to support BDS, Israeli officials maintain such action would constitute a dramatic blow to the Israeli economy. Israeli and American businesses have been impacted by BDS through divestment by major church groups in the United States, such as the Presbyterian Church USA and the United Church of Christ. The bottom line is that support for BDS undermines Israel's economy and national security. It's a direct threat to the continued vitality and success of the State of Israel. Today we'll hear from the CEO of SodaStream, Daniel Birnbaum, an Israeli company that has been the target of BDS. The BDS campaign has specifically targeted this company, which has since moved its factory out of Judea and Samaria, resulting in the loss of loss of jobs for many of the Palestinian and Israelis alike. In the case of SodaStream's factory in Judea and Samaria, which is now closed, an estimated 500 Palestinian Arabs were employed there out of a total of 1,300 employees. While SodaStream is working to secure work permits from the Israeli government for these Palestinians and other former employees at their new factory, the future employment opportunities for many of these workers remains uncertain. These are the very people who BDS claims it intends to help. We'll also hear from Professor Eugene Kontrovich. He was a major force behind the South Carolina law prohibiting companies who want to contract with the state government from participating in boycotts based on nationality, national origin, ethnicity, race, and other categories of discrimination. He will also discuss existing Federal law, international law, and the potential impact of BDS on the international trading system. Mr. Mark Dubowitz, the Executive Director of Foundation for Defense of Democracies, will also be joining us. He has written extensively on the topic of the BDS movement. Mr. Matthew Duss is the guest of my minority colleagues, and he is the President of the Foundation for Middle East Peace. The bottom line is that, one, this hearing will be critical in informing Congress about the true nature, goals, and underlying motivations of the BDS movement and its impact on trade and economic growth. American policy must be designed to counteract BDS at every turn. And with that, I now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, the ranking member, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you for holding this hearing and to examine the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, also known as BDS. And I'd also like to welcome today's witnesses for helping the committee with its work. It is the foreign policy of the United States government to oppose boycotts against the State of Israel. Israel is our strongest regional ally, and the economic isolation of Israeli goods and services will only frustrate our efforts aimed at achieving a lasting peace in the Middle East. The United States has consistently opposed the boycott of Israel declared by the Arab League in 1948. Most recently, Congress passed and President Obama signed an omnibus appropriation bill in December of 2014 that included language opposing the Arab League boycott as an impediment to peace in the region and called for its immediate termination. As with the Arab League boycott, the United States government opposes the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement that commenced in 2005 under the Organization of the Palestinian Civil Society Groups. As recently stated by State Department spokesman John Kirby, the United States has, quote, strongly opposed boycotts, divestments, campaigns, and sanctions targeting the State of Israel and will continue to do so, close quote. Some members of Congress have questioned the Administration's willingness to enforce an anti-boycott provision included in the fast-track trade bill passed last month. The provision seeks to discourage foreign partners from implementing economic sanctions against the State of Israel and also makes reference to, quote, Israeli-controlled territories, close quote. In response to this language, the State Department has reiterated strong U.S. opposition to boycotts against Israel, while also reaffirming similarly longstanding U.S. policy on Israeli settlement activity. As noted by the State Department, quote, every U.S. administration since 1967, Republican and Democrat, has opposed Israeli settlement activity beyond the 1967 lines. This administration is no different, and our policy remains firm and unchanged, close quote. This policy is in complete harmony with the desire for a two-state solution. Contrary to the criticism that has been voiced by some of our colleagues, I believe that the Administration has been very clear in consistently applying the longstanding policy of the United States to oppose boycotts against the State of Israel. I'd also note that the bipartisan sponsors of the anti-boycott language included in the trade bill, Senator Cardin and Senator Portman, have been equally clear in stating that they never intended their amendment to legislate on settlements or contravene U.S. policy on the settlements. Rather, the language seeks to further discourage boycotts against Israel in accordance with longstanding policy. I am aware that the BDS movement has become effective in some degree. It has had some impact. The Bipartisan Congressional Research Service notes that divestment from Israel and boycotts of Israel products and services have occurred to a certain extent. Mr. Birnbaum will testify, I am sure, on the economic impact of boycotts against his company, SodaStream, an Israeli manufacturer that had a manufacturing facility in the West Bank. In December of 2013, the National Council of American Studies Association, a nationwide academic organization, voted to boycott Israeli academic institutions. In recognition of the value of academic freedom and cooperation to foster peace in the Middle East, 134 members of Congress, including myself, members from both parties, sent a letter to the Association in strong opposition to their decision. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to discussing these and other issues relating to the BDS movement, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the ranking member. I will hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any members who would like to submit a written statement. We will now proceed to the witness testimony. Welcome to the witnesses. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify. So if you could please rise and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Please be seated. All witnesses answered in the affirmative. In order to allow time for discussion, please limit your testimony to 5 minutes. Your entire written statement will be made part of the record. Mr. Dubowitz, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman DeSantis, Ranking Member Lynch, members of the subcommittee, on behalf of FDD and its Center on Sanctions Illicit Finance, thank you very much for inviting me to testify today. I want to step back and take a broader look at this. The BDS movement is a tool of political, economic, and financial warfare against Israel. Those waging this war seek to first isolate and delegitimize Israel and to turn it into an international pariah. From there, by threatening reputational consequences against Israel business partners, imposing economic damages on Israel becomes an easier task. Our research has determined that the economic and financial warfare campaign currently targeting Israel's relationship with Europe is the real goal. That relationship in trade terms is valued at about $30 billion. My written testimony details the international organizations, religious institutions, private businesses, sovereign wealth funds, and universities that have joined in support of BDS in recent years. Most of them are European. They should all be identified publicly as having joined the economic and financial war against Israel. Notably, several were pressured by BDS activists and the Palestinian Authority to terminate their business ties with Israel. They have targeted major Israeli financial institutions, providing services to the West Bank and East Jerusalem through local branches. They've targeted international companies building the light rail train system in Jerusalem. They have targeted Israeli academics and international entertainers with no connection to the West Bank or East Jerusalem. This is not just about the West Bank or East Jerusalem. It is about Israel. For those well acquainted with economic and financial warfare, this is a familiar playbook as pressure is ratcheted up on the target country to inflict increasing pain. What is even more striking is that these entities have gone out of their way to single out Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, for alleged injustices while ignoring China, Russia, Iran, Syria, Sudan for their massive violations of human rights. This smacks of discrimination. It is also a bad omen for the United States and our other allies, against whom many people around the world have grievances. Mr. Chairman, America and its allies must prepare for an increasingly dangerous era of political, economic, and financial warfare targeting the United States and our allies. This type of warfare is America's default instrument of coercive statecraft. It is also the new normal in the international arena. As always, Israel is the canary in the coal mine. Many of our allies are involved in territorial disputes around the world. We may agree or disagree with their positions, but our ability and will to defend them from military, missile, cyber, WMD, and terrorist threats, amongst others, must never be dependent on our policies with respect to these territorial disputes. The same should be said about defending them against economic and financial threats. Make no mistake, after watching the U.S. Treasury Department target Iran, Russia, and Syria with sophisticated sanctions and other advanced economic strategies, America's adversaries have been developing their own economic weapons. Having witnessed the powerful impact of having Iran removed from the SWIFT banking system, last year pro-Palestinian organizations petitioned SWIFT to disconnect Israeli financial institutions. SWIFT explained that it would not take action without direction from EU regulators who, for now, have refused this request. This could change. Meanwhile, China has used economic and other coercive measures to challenge Japan, the Philippines, and our other Asian allies over the South China Sea, and frequently has used economic and diplomatic pressure to challenge international recognition of Taiwan. Russia has used political and energy warfare to threaten Eastern and Central European allies in order to try and reestablish what it considers its sphere of influence. Both China and Russia have used cyber warfare against the United States and our allies. For now, America and its allies are vulnerable, but buttressed by the fact that the U.S. dominates the global economy because of the power of the U.S. dollar. This will not last forever. China, Russia, and others are already looking at creating a parallel financial system free from American influence. Make no mistake, an economic war is undeniably underway, and that war is now expanding to America's allies too. As the BDS movement has made clear, Israel is among them. Mr. Chairman, my written testimony outlines the important legislative efforts underway at the state and federal level to protect Israel and our other allies from this economic and financial war. Congress must encourage this, but more can be done. The United States needs to create an economic defensive shield to protect us and our allies against economic and financial coercion. Congress is well placed to lead that effort. In my written testimony, I outlined a number of recommendations, including establishing a policy planning function at the U.S. Treasury Department, standing up an economic warfare directorate at the NSC, developing a doctrine on the use of economic warfare, and establishing an economic warfare command. We have entered a new era, and new structures are needed to defend the U.S. and its allies from this type of warfare. I recommend that this subcommittee work with other relevant congressional committees and the administration to institute these government reforms. In conclusion, BDS is a form of economic and financial coercion that should be viewed within a broader problem set. To counter it properly, this challenge must be addressed at a more strategic level. Failure to do so will leave the United States and our allies vulnerable to attack from economic and financial warfare. Thank you for inviting me to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. The Chair now recognizes Mr. Birnbaum for 5 minutes.
Chairman DeSantis, Ranking Member Lynch, members of the subcommittee, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify on the BDS today. For the past 8 years, I've been the CEO of SodaStream International, a company publicly traded on the NASDAQ and headquartered in Israel. SodaStream is the world's leading manufacturer and distributor of home carbonation systems. Our products are available in 45 countries around the world and sold at 70,000 stores, including 13,500 here in the United States. The products are manufactured at 12 facilities around the world, including one in New Jersey. However, our largest facility is in the Mishor Adumim industrial zone of the West Bank. I'm speaking to you today because SodaStream has been a primary target of the BDS and its affiliates since my early days with the company 8 years ago. Here's the story in a nutshell. In all the craziness of the Middle East, in the midst of all the distrust, separation, hate, and violence, there is one factory that proves that things can be different. One factory that's an island of peace where Palestinians and Israeli Jews work side by side, equal wages, equal benefits, and equal opportunity. In total, this factory employs 1,300 people, of whom 400 are Israeli Jews, 400 Israeli Arabs, and 500 are Palestinians from the West Bank. We eat together in the same dining hall and we celebrate each other's festivals. The wages we pay in this factory are according to Israeli law, wages which are 3 to 4 times higher than what our Palestinian workers could earn if they had a job in the PA. We provide a health care package for all our workers and their families that includes physician home visits, prescription drugs, overseas treatments, and even organ transplants, all that at zero copay. More broadly speaking, this factory, which may be the largest private employer in the West Bank, could also very well be the seeds of the budding economy of the future Palestinian state. This factory is, or should I say was, a true gem in many ways. But the BDS thought otherwise. They have been attacking this factory in various campaigns and schemes all over the world, calling for its closure and effectively calling for the termination of its 1,300 employees. The BDS have thrown all possible war crimes at us, accusing us of ethnic cleansing, stealing land, perpetuating the so-called occupation and profiting from it, exploiting our Palestinian workers, acting against international law, representing apartheid. Such a long and horrible list of infractions make it almost futile to defend. BDS tactics include intimidating, harassing, and threatening of our retail partners around the world. BDS activities have been vandalizing our products in stores, stickering them with hate images, throwing product on the floor, stickering, picketing, chaining themselves to the entrances to the stores, conducting violent demonstrations and flash mob events, circulating pamphlets and utilizing social media to spread vile videos on YouTube, mobilizing mainstream media, all to manipulate our retailers to drop our product. To provide the appearance of moral grounding and substantiation of international law, quote unquote, the BDS garnered support from churches, including churches here in the United States, from well-known NGOs, and support from European governments. The BDS are in the business of manipulation, violence, and destruction. But instead of using bullets and bombs, they use vicious lies and half-truths. I'd like to share with you just one example of a grotesque image broadly distributed in Europe and which was also featured at this very moment on a BDS website. On page 13 of my written submission, you will see this image that shows SodaStream product smeared with blood, and it reads in French, SodaStream, a product that kills. One product bought equals one family massacred. Are these not libelous statements that cross a line? A French court ruled in January 2014 that this conduct, specifically this image, is abusive and illegal, and the BDS was issued a cease and desist order and a punitive fine. Last October, we took a business decision to relocate this facility to a much larger facility inside the 1967 international borders of Israel. A business decision. And how did the BDS respond? Well, as expected, they celebrated a big victory. They didn't care that 5,000 Palestinians will lose their sustenance. But what's really revealing is that the attacks are continuing even after we announced our departure from the West Bank. This shows the true agenda of the BDS. To our amazement, we are now being accused of stealing land for our new factory from the adjacent Bedouin town of Rahat within Israel. This is simply preposterous. The reality is that we were invited here. In my written statement, you will see a letter by the mayor of Rahat, Talal El-Karnawi, stating that these claims are not only false, but that our factory is a blessing, bringing economic prosperity to his town. Finally, the story of the 8-year hate campaign against SodaStream really exposes the true face of the BDS. It's evident that the BDS and its affiliates use the Palestinian people as a proxy to advance their political agenda grounded in the hate of Israel. Indeed, the BDS leaders have said many times that their true agenda is not to liberate the West Bank, but rather to end the existence of the Jewish state of Israel. We shall not let that happen. Chairman DeSantis, Ranking Member Lynch, subcommittee members, this concludes my prepared statement. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes Mr. Kontrovich for 5 minutes.
Chairman DeSantis, Ranking Member Lynch, honorable members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify today about the continued campaign of economic warfare against Israel. The campaign of economic warfare against Israel dates back to the birth of the Jewish state. Starting in 1948, the Arab League organized a notorious campaign to isolate Israel. Not only did they block any economic ties between themselves and Israel, they pressured companies in third countries to also boycott Israel. In the 1970s, at the height of the Arab League's boycott campaign, the U.S. passed laws making it a crime for U.S. entities to participate in the boycott. Since then, the Arab League boycott has fallen into decline and under-enforcement. Part of this has been due to these U.S. laws and U.S. pressure in trade negotiations. Partly it has been due to changing Arab attitudes towards Israel. As Arab states were increasing their trade with Israel, the old boycott campaign developed a new face. At the Durban Forum in 2001, anti-Israel groups, coordinated by UN agencies, adopted boycotts and sanctions as a policy tool to isolate Israel. Thus, private actors appear today at the forefront of boycott campaigns today, but the strategy is the same as the Arab League pursued, to choke off and delegitimize Israel. Several legislative initiatives in Congress seek to update U.S. laws to deal with the new face of the boycott movement. Part of this legislation has passed in the TPA, and another important part, contained in H.R. 1907, is currently in conference. These laws are merely mild updatings of the traditional U.S. approach to Israel boycotts. They've received across-the-board unanimous support in Congress. Nonetheless, some object to the anti-boycott laws because they would also apply to boycotts that also are directed at entities in, quote, territories under Israeli jurisdiction, which means West Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and other parts of the West Bank. Contrary to the entirely unsupported claims of these critics, this is also entirely consistent with U.S. law and policy. The existing anti-boycott laws also apply to boycotts of any Israeli nationals or companies, regardless of their location. No one has ever objected to this or sought to limit the application. In signing the 1997 anti-Arab League boycott law, President Carter observed that the issue goes to the very heart of free trade amongst nations, and that boycotts were in fact divisive measures aimed particularly at Jews. He has never, President Carter and no one else has ever suggested that the anti-boycott laws be limited to Israeli companies in any particular location. Moreover, the U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement, passed in 1985 and expanded in 1996, expressly allows Israeli products from the West Bank to receive the same status for U.S. trade purposes as any other Israeli products. As reflected in the U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act, this was immediately put into effect by President Clinton. Indeed, there is no basis in U.S. law for disallowing Congress to apply particular laws, trade laws, or other lawful measures to the West Bank or any other territories. Nor does this contradict U.S. foreign policy. While the executive has indeed at times opposed settlement expansion or settlement construction, that is to say, adding homes for Jews in the disputed territory, no administration has ever opposed business activity there. Indeed, the U.S. has long recognized that peace depends on increased prosperity and economic integration. Moreover, boycotts do not seek to prevent settlement growth. Rather, their express goal is to choke off and eliminate all Jewish presence, even mere business activity, in the disputed areas, including ones that would surely come under Israeli sovereignty in any peace deal. This fundamentally contradicts U.S. policy dating back to 1967 that any ultimate parameters must be negotiated. Finally, this language, this now controversial language, is necessary to prevent anti-boycott laws from becoming indeterminate and incoherent. For example, language referring to territories controlled by Israel is necessary simply to have such laws apply to Western Jerusalem. As is well known, the position of the administration and several administrations is that Western Jerusalem is not part of the State of Israel. Thus, if Congress wishes to ensure that its trade measures and laws concerning Israel apply to Western Jerusalem, language like territories under Israeli jurisdiction is needed, and that is based on the administration's own view in the Zvitovsky case. Moreover, boycotts of settlements are not self-limiting because settlements are not businesses. Business is one thing, settlements are another. What about the Tel Aviv tour operator that goes to the old city, organizes a tour? That could fall within the boycott movement and European sanctions. On the other hand, we know that even the President of the United States has visited the old city. This is not what people mean by settlements. There is nothing internationally illegal about doing business in the territories. One does not need to be a supporter of settlements to understand this. Just last year, a prestigious French appeals court ruled that French and international law allows French companies and businesses to do business with the Israeli government in these areas. Finally, as I elaborate in my written testimony, the planned EU trade restrictions, which some of these measures go to, would violate multiple provisions of the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. Let me conclude with some brief recommendations. Congress should quickly pass House H.R. 1907 to make clear that these measures are violations of the GATT, to encourage states to continue to pass laws dealing with boycotts, and to protect United States companies from discriminatory and baseless foreign judgments based on perversions of international law.
I thank the gentleman. The Chair now recognizes Mr. Duss for 5 minutes.
Chairman DeSantis, Ranking Member Lynch, members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for inviting me here to speak to you on this timely issue. In the 10 years since it commenced, the BDS movement has slowly but steadily risen in visibility. I'd like to focus today on the role that this movement has been playing recently in the United States, particularly with regard to recent congressional legislation. In order to do that, I want to first take a moment to identify just what we're talking about when we discuss BDS. This movement has 3 main demands. The first is an end to the occupation that began in 1967. The second is equal rights for Palestinian citizens within Israel. The third is protecting and promoting the rights of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes in what is today Israel. This movement is distinct from many peace activists in Israel, Palestine, the United States, Europe, and elsewhere who support boycotts of settlement products and divestment of businesses profiting from the 48-year-old occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem as part of an effort to preserve the possibility of a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Crucially, the BDS movement is also distinct from the recent moves by the European Union to more aggressively distinguish between Israel within the pre-1967 lines known as the Green Line and the occupied territories. This is where we come to the recent trade legislation by Congress and the response from the State Department. With the stated intention of protecting Israel from BDS, the recently passed Trade Promotion Authority contained a provision that implied a significant shift in the policy of the United States since 1967. The provision requires the U.S. Trade Representative to discourage European Union countries from boycotting, quote, Israel or persons doing business in Israel or Israeli-controlled territories. This is why I think it was important and appropriate for the State Department to offer a clarification as it did upon passage of the trade bill, stating that the U.S. will continue to make a distinction between Israel and the occupied territories as the United States has done since 1967. Now, I can talk more about this in the Q&A, and my written statement contains more detailed analysis, but to the extent that one sees BDS actions as part of an effort to delegitimize Israel, and I think that's clearly the case with regard to a member of the leaders of the movement, they should certainly be addressed, but I would advise not through legislation. Israel has protections it needs and deserves under existing U.S. law. The arguments raised by the BDS movement and academic and other civil society institutions should be addressed in the American tradition with thoughtful, considered, and ethical counter-arguments. I would also take a moment here to suggest that it is a mistake to focus on the BDS movement while ignoring the main reason for its continued growth, which is the failure to end the occupation that began in 1967 and achieve Palestinian freedom and sovereignty. If one is genuinely concerned about the impact of the BDS movement, the surest way to take the wind out of its sails and arrest its growth would be to work to achieve those goals and act against efforts which prevent or foreclose them. Moreover, it would be counterproductive to give BDS an unearned victory here by cooperating in any way with the conflation of Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. We can and must support Israel in defending herself against actions that genuinely threaten her security and legitimacy. This has been a consistent American position since Israel's birth. Another consistent American position, however, has been in opposing the creation of Israeli settlements, which have been deemed illegitimate and an obstacle to peace by every U.S. president since 1967. Efforts to blur that distinction are just as dangerous to Israel's existence as a Jewish and democratic state as attacks on Israel's legitimacy itself. It is entirely consistent with longstanding U.S. policy and indeed necessary to preserve the ultimate goal of a two-state solution, to continue to make that distinction in U.S. policy and law. I thank you, gentlemen, for your time and attention. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. The Chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. Dubowitz, for a lot of Americans may not know what BDS is there any doubt in your mind that BDS is more than just trying to boycott certain policies, that BDS is aimed really at the legitimacy of Israel itself?
Chairman, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, this is a familiar playbook for people who have worked in the area of sanctions. I've spent over a decade working on sanctions, and it's a very familiar playbook. As I said, it's about delegitimization at the political level. It's about establishing the country as an international pariah. And then it's about using a combination of state actions and private actions in an economic and financial warfare campaign against that country. And I would make another point, and that is that many of our allies actually are involved in territorial disputes around the world. I mean, in the South China Sea right now, there are huge disputes going on between China and Vietnam and the Philippines and Japan and other countries. The United States shouldn't be taking a position on territorial disputes in the context of economic and financial warfare. We don't, for example, when supporting our allies against cyber threats, conventional military threats, terrorist threats, or missile threats. We have a firm policy of defending our allies when we actually fund and sell missile defense systems or cyber defense systems to Israel. We expect the Israeli government to use those systems protecting everybody in the region, including in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. There should be no distinction with respect to economic and financial warfare.
Now, Mr. Birnbaum, you have this company, you're employing all these Palestinian Arabs, you get targeted by BDS, so then you move operations, but yet they still target you. And so I think that to me is very revealing, and I really appreciate your testimony, because I think that really educates the American people about what is really at the heart of this movement. But is there any doubt in your mind that this BDS movement is targeted beyond just territorial issues, but about the legitimacy of Israel itself?
Mr. Chairman, there's no doubt in my mind at all. And if I had any doubt, it was quenched the moment we announced that we're moving away from our West Bank factory on October 29th, 2014, and the day later there were celebrations and new attacks on SodaStream for supposedly occupying the land of Bedouins within the State of Israel. And you can see those attacks at this very moment on certain BDS websites. And for me, that is evidence that the BDS is not after freeing the supposed occupied West Bank, but the BDS is after the destruction of the State of Israel. They are not going to leave us alone, but we're going to continue doing what we're doing because we're doing the right thing for our employees and for consumers around the world. They will not stop us.
So because of the movement in response to BDS, how many fewer Palestinian Arabs are now employed?
That's a situation that we're discussing right now with the Israeli government. There are, this moment, there are about 400 Palestinians still on our payroll in both of the factories. One is in the process of being closed, the one in the West Bank. We expect that will close around October of this year. And another couple of hundred are already working in a new facility under temporary work permits. If the Israeli government is gracious enough to grant us work permits for these Palestinians, we can continue to employ them. And by the way, each one of them sustained 10 people, 10 dependents on average. So right now we're impacting about 4,000 Palestinian people. I'm hoping the Israeli government will come through, but it's been a struggle and a debate that we've had with them for over 10 months now.
So it's possible that there would be less jobs for Palestinian Arabs.
Absolutely. As it stands right now, Mr. Chairman, the work permits we have for the Israeli employees, for the Palestinian employees that are working in Israel right now are to expire at the end of this month in just a few days.
Professor Kantorovich, I think that you and Mr. Duss have a disagreement about longstanding U.S. policy, particularly this TPA provision. As he characterized it, this was a significant change. The State Department was right to kind of make the statements that they did. Your position, I think, is that this has been pretty consistent, that we've not discriminated about particular commerce. So would you care to respond to Mr. Duss?
Thank you. So the United States position is articulated in laws and policies that the United States has adopted. I did not hear Mr. Duss cite laws to the contrary. On the other hand, the existing anti-boycott legislation applies to companies organized under Israeli law, regardless of where they would operate. Similarly, the U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act gives the President the authority, which every president since Bill Clinton has exercised, to give Israeli treatment to products from areas under Israeli jurisdiction. Thus, every existing U.S. law on the subject has extended Israeli national treatment to these areas.
And Mr. Duss, I mean, regardless of kind of your views of the situation, I mean, Congress passed a specific provision in the Trade Authority bill. I mean, isn't the appropriate response for the State Department doesn't want that to come to Congress and ask them to change it, to just try to say you're not going to instruct your trade negotiators when they're negotiating deals, particularly with the European countries where this is a bigger issue, to simply not abide by it?
Thank you for the question. I think the principle was that the State Department was insisting on continuing consistency in U.S. policy, which is one of distinction between Israel, the State of Israel, and the occupied territories.
It might not be consistent with what was actually passed by the Congress, and I think that what the Congress, I think, intended is similar to what Professor Kantorovich laid out, was that boycotting Israel, we want to target that. We want our trade negotiators to negotiate specifically with the European countries that, you know what, you're not going to boycott Israel. And the fact that there may be a company located somewhere else, that's not been a distinction that the Congress has wanted to draw. Let me ask all of you, but Mr. Dubowitz, the growth of BDS in colleges and in Europe, can you give us a sense of, I think I was in law school when I first heard about it. It was like a really fringe thing. I mean, I know it's not mainstream in American society, but it seems to have picked up steam on college campuses and in European capitals.
I think that's exactly right. And obviously the goal is, the college campaign is a goal of political delegitimization. It's to turn Israel into an international pariah. Then it makes it much easier for the BDS movement and their supporters to specifically launch an economic and financial warfare campaign against Israeli companies, with a fundamental choice: you either do business with Israel or you do business with Europe, but you can't choose between, but you can't have both. And so very much the BDS movement at an activist level is about political delegitimization. They also then have now turned their sights on not only Israeli companies, but international companies that are actually working in Israel. And the fundamental goal is to undermine the Israeli economy, inflict severe economic damage on Israel, and try to change their policies. Again, from a U.S. national security point of view, there are many people in the world that have grievances against the United States. They will turn to economic and financial warfare against us and against all our allies. And I think it's incumbent upon the U.S. Congress to help create an economic defensive shield to protect all of our allies against the use of this new weapon.
Professor, do you agree? I mean, BDS has picked up steam on American college campuses over the last decade?
It does seem to be attracting more press attention, but one needs to also differentiate between college activity and the activity in the European Union, which is actually probably the most threatening. In college, there's often lots of tumult that does not amount to much.
That's been an increase in
But the-
attention in the European
the-
capitals, correct?
Yes. I would like to offer one clarification about the State Department statement about the TPA.
Sure.
At least in the public statement, and I think it's important to note this and hold them to this, the State Department did not say that they would not enforce the provisions of the TPA. They did say they didn't like them, but they did not come out and say they would not enforce them. There's been no presidential signing statement, so the natural assumption, absent such a statement, would be that they would continue to enforce it and apply it despite not liking it.
Spend some time here. That might not be a good assumption, but I take your point. All right, my time is up. I will now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to revisit the idea about congressional intent, though. I think you raise an important point. But in determining what congressional intent is in a bill, I think it is entirely appropriate to ask those legislators what they intended. And we did ask Senator Cardin, and we did ask Senator Portman what they intended by their amendment. And they intended that there be no change in the State Department policy. So that's probably why you don't have a clarification on what State Department policy is, because they intended no change, and the administration saw no change, and the amendment passed unanimously with no controversy whatsoever. And it was a consistent continuation of U.S. policy. I think one thing we can agree on is the importance of reaching a sustainable, peaceful solution between Israelis and Palestinians. The two-state solution offers a vision of two secure, coexisting democratic nations. It's been a longstanding foreign policy objective of the United States and is supported by the vast majority of Congress. Mr. Duss, how long has the United States supported the two-state solution as a matter of official policy?
As a matter of official policy, I believe it was President George W. Bush who first articulated specifically and explicitly that the two-state solution was the policy of the United States.
Now, I'm not as – I know the outward manifestations of the BDS movement, but does the BDS movement generally support or oppose the two-state solution?
The BDS movement does not make claims about outcomes. It claims to be a rights-based movement. I think looking at the statements of a number of BDS leaders, it's clear that quite a few of them do not support the existence of Israel. They support other solutions. This is why I think it was very important, it is very important, as I said in my opening statement, to distinguish between those who support economic action against Israel as a whole, such as the BDS movement, and those who support targeted action against the settlements, such as people in Israel, people in the United States, people in Europe, including the EU. This is exactly what the EU measures being discussed now focus on. This is not boycott. This is the EU just enforcing its own laws, focusing on its own economic activities with Israel. This is the EU saying to Israel, we want to do business with you. We want you to continue to be a favored trading partner. However, our own laws prevent us from engaging with these entities across the Green Line.
Okay. There's already been some discussion of the provision in the Trade Promotion Authority bill, and specifically the phrase, and I quote, Israel or persons doing business in Israel or Israeli-controlled territories. Mr. Duss, your written testimony states, and I will quote it here, conflating Israel and the settlements represents a clear threat to the two-state solution itself, undermining our country's ability to effectively broker a peace agreement between the Palestinians and Israelis. This is why it's important and appropriate for State Department to offer a clarification. Can you elaborate or clarify on that?
Right. I think what the State Department was saying, and this is a view that we share very closely with our European allies, is that for the U.S. and its partners to be able to broker a peace in which the disposition of these territories will be decided bilaterally between negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians, we cannot acquiesce due to the conflation of these territories in advance.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Your testimony also indicates that blurring the distinction between Israel and its settlements is quote, precisely what most radical elements in the BDS movement strive to achieve, and it would be hugely counterproductive to give BDS an unearned win by cooperating in any way with that conflation. Can you elaborate on that, clarify?
Yes. Thank you. I think for many in the more extreme elements of BDS, And again, this is why I think the distinction between those who focus on the settlements in the occupied territories and who recognize the legitimacy of Israel, the security and the continued existence of Israel, and whose goal is the two-state solution. You need to make a distinction between those in the BDS and who do not recognize Israel's legitimacy, and they see all of Israel and the occupied territories as illegitimate. And I think by conflating those things, by treating all boycotts and all economic pressure as just another part of BDS, you make the BDS movement out to be much stronger and much larger than it is.
Okay, I have 12 seconds left. I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Chair now recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. Russell, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in his submitted remarks, Mr. Duss notes that arguments by the BDS should be addressed in the American tradition with thoughtful, considered, and ethical counter-arguments. I would like to note for the record that Mr. Duss's father has accused Israel of war crimes and claimed that modern Israelis are not descended from biblical Jews. I would also like to note for the record that Mr. Duss's brother is infamous for his tweet, and I quote, "Why are so many Israeli politicians rapists?" End quote. I would also like to note that Mr. Duss's work with the Center for American Progress reacted in the height of offensive anti-Semitic rhetoric when he had attempted to build his views with Nazi-era posters on their Think Progress website. This drew an extremely rare rebuke of the Center for American Progress writers from the White House, a very rare thing indeed, that these views and tactics were troubling. In fact, this rebuke also further notes that the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the Anti-Defamation League, and the American Jewish Committee have all termed the anti-Israeli rhetoric of a Mr. Gilani and fellow Center for American Progress writers Eli Clifton, Ali Garib, Matt Duss, and Ben Armbruster to be infected with Jew hatred and discriminatory policy positions toward Israel. And so my question would be, Mr. Dubowitz, do you think that these types of arguments that are coming from this key witness that has been elevated to testify before Congress, are these thoughtful, considered, and ethical ways to approach the issue? Yes or no?
So, Congressman, I think that it's absolutely critical to examine the backgrounds and the writings and the research of people who appear before your subcommittee.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Birnbaum, do you believe such tactics to be thoughtful, considered, and ethical counter-arguments?
No. And I'd take it one step further, and I'd like to correct, for the record, something that Mr. Duss said. Now, I'm not an international scholar, and I'm not a lawyer, but Mr. Duss said that the BDS does not have a position on the two-state solution, and they do. I do know how to read, and I'm reading some quotes from Mr. Omar Barghouti, the co-chair of the BDS, and he said, "Good riddance, the two-state solution for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is finally dead, but someone has to issue an official death certificate before the rotting corpse is given a proper burial and we can all move on." And there are many other such quotes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kantorovich, do you believe that these are thoughtful, considered, and ethical approaches for argument?
Well, there's a contradiction in this perspective. Mr. Duss, on one hand, claims that we should have discussions and arguments about BDS rather than having legislation. On the other hand, he acknowledges that Israel has much-deserved protections against boycotts in the form of the anti-Arab boycott, anti-Arab League boycott laws, etc. That demonstrates that the American tradition is not simply to discuss trade and strategic problems, but to take action about them.
And thank you, sir. And so, Mr. Chairman, I am somewhat troubled that we have before us today someone elevated to come and testify before Congress that might have such a closet to be examined. And I find that these types of approaches to the BDS problem to be unthoughtful, ill-considered, and of questionable tactics. And as a result, I really don't want to hear any more that he might have to say in this hearing. Thank you, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Heiss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dubowicz, do you believe that the BDS is going to positively or negatively impact the peace process between Israeli and Palestinians?
Congressman, the short answer is negatively. I mean, if you're launching an economic and financial warfare campaign against Israel, it's likely to only harden positions. It's likely to only exacerbate tensions. And I think, as Mr. Birnbaum has eloquently put it, it has a significant cost, not just to Israelis, but to Palestinians as well.
Okay. Well, would you go so far as to say, again, in your opinion, that BDS really is a threat to Israel as a Jewish state?
I would certainly go that far, and I would say that BDS, again, I want to just sort of broaden the lens here. Economic and financial warfare against a close American ally is a threat to America, and it's a threat to our other allies. You know, as I said, there are territorial disputes happening all over the world that our allies are involved in. It's one thing for the U.S. government to have a political view on those territorial disputes. It's another thing for the U.S. government not to support a close ally that is the target of economic and financial warfare or cyber warfare or military warfare or any other kind of warfare. And we need to defend our allies, or this problem will come to our shores. We learned that problem with terrorism. Terrorism was directed against Israelis. They are the canary in the coal mine, and eventually these threats come to us.
All right. So you mentioned a couple of things. Defending our allies is one thing, but you say this is a threat to America as well. One or two sentences. What is the threat to America?
Well, the threat is that there are many people in the world that have grievances against the United States, and the international order is changing with the rise of China and Russia and the attempt to establish an alternative financial order. I can talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but clearly these rising powers are interested in using economic coercion, financial coercion directly against the United States. So we need to harden our defenses. And in my testimony, I outline exactly how Congress and the executive branch should begin to think about this. We need to create an economic defensive shield to protect American national and economic interests.
Mr. Kantorovich, let me ask you, how much of a threat do you believe that this poses to Israel's economy as well as their overall security?
The larger threat to Israel's economy and security comes from the planned measures, the discussed measures of the European Commission, which are being encouraged by BDS groups. In the long run, I think they pose a real threat to both Israel and the viability of a two-state solution. Like Mr. Dubowicz, I would like to echo that this has a particularly strong impact on the United States. What the European Union is trying to do is to use trade restrictions, and discriminatory trade restrictions as a tool of foreign relations. The central pillar of the GATT and World Trade Organization trading system, which the U.S. is the biggest proponent of, is to separate trade policy from foreign policy disputes. By allowing for discriminatory, targeted, non-most favored nation treatment of Israel, it would set a precedent that would have significant impacts for a major trading country like the United States.
Okay, thank you. Let me go back, Mr. Dubowicz, to you then. Does Congress, in your opinion, do we have any options? Is there anything legislatively that we can or should do towards or against private organizations that are funding the BDS movement?
Well, Congressman, I do think so, and I want to just echo the comments of Mr. Kantorovich, and that is that the European Union, again, is attempting to use economic and financial warfare, in this case against Israel. And Mr. Kantorovich is right that the European Union may use this against other American allies. If the Philippines has a major dispute with the Chinese in the South China Sea, and the European Union decides that given the huge EU-Sino trade and economic relationship, that they're going to side with China over the Philippines, they may actually be persuaded by the Chinese to use their economic and financial leverage against the Philippines. And we would have to defend the Philippines as a close ally economically and financially. And Congress can do that. We certainly, there's a huge amount of expertise in Congress on the issue of sanctions, and creating not only an offensive sanctions instrument that has been the focus of the U.S. government and Congress for years, but creating a defensive architecture, a defensive shield legislative initiatives that are occurring in Congress today at the state level in Illinois and South Carolina, I think are an important first step. The U.S. government needs to be restructured and reoriented in the way that it thinks about this economic warfare doctrine and the institutions within the U.S. Treasury Department and elsewhere. I've done a lot of research into this topic, and they are ill-prepared to defend the United States and our allies against this new threat of economic and financial coercion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Maybe Professor Konorovich, the BDS, are they trying to boycott regimes like Iran or the Castro brothers or North Korea as well?
Not only are there not such measures against against countries with massive human rights violations and breaches of international law, I think what's important to note is even at the level of the European Union, forget the NGOs of the BDS movement for a second, even at the European level, the rules that they're seeking to impose against Israel, they're not imposing even on other areas and situations where they believe there are settlements and a military occupation. Take Western Sahara, for example. The European Union, like the rest of the world, recognizes that it is occupied by Morocco. The majority of the population there are settlers. On the other hand, under European law, Moroccan produce from Western Sahara is labeled made in Morocco when imported in the European Union. When asked about this, European officials have said that's completely consistent with European law. Labeling products is one thing, sovereign status of territories is another thing. Indeed, Europe has been entering into more and more treaties with Morocco, allowing them access to Western Sahara. European parliamentary documents themselves concede that Europe's treatment of Israel is inconsistent with its treatment of other situations they view as similar in a way which is even problematic under European notions of uniformity.
Mr. Birnbaum, what about in your experience when BDS was targeting SodaStream? Did you notice them also targeting soda companies in Iran or in North Korea or anything like that?
No, never. From my perspective, it appears they're blind to any other infractions in the world, assuming we're an infraction. We are not. But I'll give an important case would be, on the contrary, in the Nordics, the BDS caused the Nordic retailers, all of them, all of the Nordic states, to stop sourcing SodaStream product from the West Bank and sourcing it from the mother of human rights, China. So that's not a problem for the Nordic markets to import product from China, and we had to terminate at that point in time a few hundred Palestinian workers that could have enjoyed employment had we been able to continue to source for the Nordic markets from the West Bank.
So why the double standard? Well, I guess we'll let people draw their own conclusions. I mean, I think it's odd that Israel, with this one country, would have to live under a totally separate standard than any other country in the rest of the world in the eyes of some of these people, and I wonder what motivates that. I'm done. Mr. Lynch, do you have any more questions? Okay, I will now yield 5 minutes to the ranking member, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you. Mr. Duss, there were some very serious accusations made by the gentleman from Oklahoma earlier in the hearing. While he asked everybody else their opinion of his accusations of you, he did not give you an opportunity to address those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to yield my 5 minutes to you. I also know that he made accusations about stuff that your brother said. I'm not sure how you're going to handle that, but take whatever time you like. I think it's fairness. This is Congress. This is an open hearing, and we should hear from our witnesses. So I'm going to yield you the balance of my time for you to address the accusations made against you. Proceed.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I don't want to waste too much time on those. I would, with regard to my father and my brother, they both dedicated their lives to doing humanitarian work around the world, and I'm very proud of them. So I think there have been statements they may have said out in the past that have been taken out of context. And with my own work as well, I stand behind everything I've ever written. And as I've said earlier here in this hearing, and will continue to say, I stand for a two-state solution, the security and the continued existence of the State of Israel, and the rights and self-determination of the Palestinian people. That's the focus of my work, and that's the reason I'm here today. I'd like to address the point about the BDS movement, and is it focusing on any other countries? I think it's quite fair to bring up other abusive regimes, and are they focused? I think Iran for one, is the focus of a major international sanctions campaign on a whole range of issues. Those sanctions related to its nuclear program, if the deal goes through, will slowly be taken off, but it would still be focused. It will still be pressured on human rights issues and terrorism issues. But I think the key point to keep in mind here is that the BDS movement, agree or disagree with it, is driven by Palestinian civil society and a call by Palestinian civil society groups from 2005 to focus economic pressure on Israel. And that way, I think it is quite easy to understand why the Palestinians, they're not being occupied by other countries. They're being occupied, in their view, by Israel. That's why Israel is the focus of their campaign. One other quick response to my colleague, Mr. Kontrovich's comment about boycotts in law. I think it's important, again, that we keep coming back to this point about distinction. I would distinguish between civil society actions and law, and, for example, the Arab boycott. These are countries that are boycotting Israel as a state. Those are countries, these are not civil society actors. And again, here's the distinction with the EU. The way that the EU is defining and enforcing its own laws is with regard to making a distinction between the occupied territories and with Israel. They are happy and want to increase trade with the State of Israel, but they want to be careful to make a distinction between Israel and the occupied territories. Thank you.
I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank the witnesses for coming here and your testimony. I think that this trade is going to be something that Congress, we're going to need to conduct oversight over to make sure that the law is being applied. I just think it would be a complete disaster to be negotiating trade agreements with these European countries, violate this provision, allow them to do economic boycotts of Israel. I mean, we're the one that provides the Europeans with their security, with our defense. I mean, they don't defend themselves. It's really us. And so I think it's something that we need to keep an eye on, and I think that this committee, as negotiations go forward, we're going to look to conduct the appropriate oversight. So I thank everybody, and this hearing is adjourned.